All right, welcome to Obsessed Garage. I'm Matt Mormon. Let's do a technical dive into if you bought a set or you're considering buying a set, what do you need? And then how do you set up your speakers once you get them? Those are my recommended settings, as well as recommended cabling and things like that. We'll eventually have full packages where you can buy this as a one-click solution. So I will say that this same process applies to all three of the core series speakers. Core 7s, which I have behind me here, Core 47s, and the big boys, the Core 59s, have an identical amplifier on the back, and so you would hook them up all identically, or hook them all up the same. So let's go into what we have here. So one of the best parts about setting up a studio monitor system in your garage is you don't need a lot of components. There's not a lot that goes with it. In fact, if we do a Bluesound Node, it's a tiny little box, so that you don't need a cabinet. You can put it on top of your cabinet. You don't need a lot of space. And so, of course, your first thing you've already done is you've chosen your speaker. You said, okay, my budget allows for me to spend $5,000, and so I'm going to end up with Core 47. It's really as simple as that when you're buying these things. Go watch my recommendations and the deep dive into the Core line. Make sure you check that out in order to choose your speaker. So you've chosen your speaker. Let's say in this case you've chosen Core 47. So we're going to go into how to set that up. So you have your speaker. In this case, I don't sell these yet, but I'm hoping by the time you watch this video, I have them. This is an isoacoustics. This helps isolate the speaker from the cabinet or from the tabletop, mainly, so you're not scratching it up. I think it looks good as well, but we don't have these in the store, but that's what we're using here, or that's what it's set up on. This is an isoacoustics Apert, I believe, 300. Then you have your source component. We have, in this case, we have two different sources, depending on your, I guess, again, how much money you're willing to spend. This is the NAD DAC. This is a C658. This is not an amplifier. This is just a pre-amplifier. Reason for that is our speakers have, you can see the heat sink on the back of the speaker. The speaker has its own amplifier, so that's the really cool part about this setup. Or you could use a Bluesound Node. This is $1,650 as of today. This is $550, so it really comes down to money. If you can spend the more money, you would buy the C658. Then we have some cables, and look at how magical this is. Each speaker is going to have a power cord. So you'll have a power cord. It looks like any old power cord. Let me pull one here and show you what that looks like. Boom. Simple 3-prong grounded power cord. I want to say it's a 6-footer. Roughly 6-foot power cord. So each speaker has that. Each component will have that as well. You're going to have a pair of XLR cables. You're going to have a Y adapter, because we're going to do a subwoofer wireless. This is the OSD Audio Nero. This is a wireless subwoofer transmitter. And then you're going to have a pair of XLR to RCA if we're doing the Bluesound Node. So you can see in most situations I've got a very, very simple connectivity set, or simple set of cables. Depending on what day you're watching this and what we have in stock, I'm generally doing either monoprice cables or Metra cables. Both are, not ultra high end, but they get the job done, and that's really what I think cables are designed to do. They get the job done for as little dollars as possible. So let's take a look at how you would connect these speakers. I'm going to go into the back of each device. I've got a Core 7 here. I'm going to show you the devices. I'm going to show you the speaker. Let's start with the speaker, because you're going to generally set this up first. We're going to put our speakers into position, and I'm going to mock up our system here, just on our table here, on our countertop. Of course, you would generally mock it up like on the top of your cabinets, or somewhere else. So Core 7, let's go into the back switches and talk to you about how to do that. So you have, on a Dynaudio Core, quite a bit more complicated than an LYD line. They have more DSP settings, more options that you can choose on the speaker set. And so you want to be aware of what they are and how to choose which one you're going to select I've played with them, so I'll give you my recommendation, but you can choose when you're in the garage. And the nice thing about them, they're switches. You don't need to have a lot of electronic skills. You don't need to know how to navigate menus. You just come back here and flip the switch. Really, really simple. First switch is power mode. I find that the on and standby, I find that the option there, I find that you leave it in standby. These are very, very quickly responding, much quicker than the LYD series, the lower end version. So always leave it on standby. That way it'll signal sense as soon as it hears audio, clicks on within a second or so. The Pascal Class D amplifiers in the cores actually is very, very responsive and turns on immediately. So standby is where you want. Bass extension, because we're going to have some really quality source components, and we have the ability to adjust or cross over. If we're going to add a subwoofer, there's no reason to switch to high pass, so we're going to leave in full extension. I want these speakers playing as full of range as possible, and so we're going to do any of our crossover adjustment inside of our source device. So leave that at full. Then you have really simple ones. You have a really simple connection is your speaker left or right. You know, just choose. It matters on the cores, left speaker, right speaker. So you need to take that into account when you're doing the Core 59s or the Core 47s, like what we have here. You want the woofer and the port facing in, so you want them on the inside of the speaker. And then again, you're going to denote, is it the left speaker or the right speaker? And actually, I take that back. Core 47s, you actually purchase whether they're left or right. And let me see. It still has the left to right switch, but there is a physical left and right speaker because of the way that the logo and the tweeter is configured. Core 59s, you can flip the woofer and tweeter back and forth. So there's no left or right speaker on Core 59. There's no left or right speaker on Core 7, but there is an actual different model number for Core 47s. But you still have a switch on all of them. Then we get into our DSP and sound balance settings. This is I believe they call it tilt filter. So I like this in dark mode. The way that this switch works, so think about it. If you want to get technical, it's adding or subtracting 1.5 decibels at a certain frequency range. But really, if you want to think about this logically, if you tend to be a high frequency sensitive, so tweeter sensitive like I am, you're going to run the speaker dark. That shifts the tone slightly downward or slightly off of high frequencies and pushes it slightly toward low frequencies. It shifts it 1.5 decibels at 20 kilohertz, shifts it up 1.5 decibels at 20 hertz. Or I guess it'd be whatever the lowest frequency that this can produce. Neutral would be no adjustment, and then bright would be shifting toward the high frequencies. So if you have tone deficiencies in the high frequencies, you're probably going to want to run it bright. I like smooth. Plus the garage, we got metal cabinets, we've got concrete floors, we've got metal garage doors, we've got metal cars. You probably want to run it at dark. But you can play with that. And it's as simple as just memorize where the switch is so you can get back there and flip it back and forth. Then we have our two DSP settings, and these work together. We have anechoic, desk, and soffit, and then we have free, wall, and corner. So Dynaudio recommends that you start with your position with choosing your first, whether you're doing anechoic, desk, or soffit. I run it anechoic. Technically, anechoic would be, I have a sound-treated room, which you're not in your garage. I have it on stands, and I've got it, several feet off of the wall, just sort of sitting, floating in the middle of the room like you see with normal high-end 2-channel setups. That's what their recommended setting is. So most of you, if you're looking for Dynaudio's recommendation, you'd run it at desk. Soffit would be if you had an acoustically designed soffit in on the wall, or they build it into the acoustic treatments in a studio environment. We're probably never going to choose that option. So you're either going to choose anechoic or desk. I ran it anechoic. I think it sounds the best even sitting on a cabinet next to a wall, but you can play with that adjustment while you're while you're listening to the speaker. I would suggest you break the speakers in first before you really start worrying about these. So I would start it at anechoic, and then you're going to choose your position, and I generally choose free as well. I don't find that I end up with boomy bass or any issues. These are front ported, all three of them, so I haven't found much issue. And when you choose wall or corner, it just really adjusts the bass output, and I don't know that I love that. So I run it anechoic and free, even if I have it on the top of a cabinet next to a wall or in the, on my shelf on the corner. But you can play with those two. Again, these work together. Free, wall, corner. I don't think I really need to explain that. I think it makes perfect sense. Then you have two volume related switches. You're going to run your analog input sensitivity, and I generally run that at plus 24 dB. It just depends on your device. If you run this at lower, if you run the sensitivity at a lower setting, you're going to be using more volume on your preamp, which is fine, but you may not be able to reach the volumes you're hoping to reach, or you may not maximize the speaker. So I find with these sophisticated preamps that we're using that are really designed for audio and theater, so we're putting consumer-based with professional-based product. I think running at 24 dB means I have ultimate headroom. I can run the volume in the middle and let the speakers go as high, turn them up as loud as they can go. Same thing, SPL, you're going to play with this, but SPL output, this is basically a volume control that you're never going to touch again. I just run it at 112 decibels, and then again, I'm adjusting volume because I have full volume adjustability on my source components. Then you have three inputs. You're never going to use the world clock. I'm not even sure what that's for. You're probably never going to use the USB service connection here either. So these would be, or at least the USB connection would be for if you ever sent the speaker in for service. Hopefully that'll never happen. And so you have three connections, two of which you're never going to use. So digital in, digital out. This would be if you had, what is that called? It's eluding me at the moment, but if you had a mixing board or you were doing something in the studio where it has a digital output, but we aren't going to have that in the garage. We're going to have an analog connection. So our analog input sensitivity controls how much, how sensitive the analog input connection. And notice Dynaudio cores only have XLR. They do not have a traditional RCA connection. And then we already talked about the power cord. So these do not have a power switch like some most components do. It's a simple signal sense. As soon as it receives signal, it'll turn on. And all of them have a. Do these have? Yeah, there's a red light there. Yeah, so all of the speakers will have a red and green indicator light as well, including the Dynaudio core subwoofer. So let's talk about our source components, and then we'll actually connect a set of speakers and show you how to do it. Really simple. So let's talk about my two recommended source components. If you end up buying the packages that we put together, these are going to be your options. The source that I would recommend with Dynaudio core would be the NAD C685. This is a preamplifier. The source that if we're trying to keep the dollars under control, you do the Bluesound Node, but in most cases you're going to want to choose the C685, and I'll explain why in a minute. But on the back side of this, we have several different connections. The beauty of a studio monitor setup is that we don't need a lot of stuff, and so what we're going to do, think about this, we're sending the audio signal unamplified out of our XLR connections into the back of our speaker. And so we're going to take this. In this case, I have a Metra Velux 2-meter XLR cable. We're doing these in 1 meter, 2 meter, 4 meter, 6 meter, and then they don't make any longer than that. So then we have the option for a monoprice we can do in 25 feet, 35 feet, or 50 feet. So we'll be stocking all those various sizes depending on what you need. The beauty of doing a C685 is I don't need any adapters or anything. I'm going to take my XLR connection, plug it right into here. This is the left. I want the right. since we're on camera here. So I'm going to plug into the back, and then I'm going to run my XLR cable over to the back of my speaker. Pretend that this is the Core 47. Again, we're going to connect this to our analog input. That's it. It's the only connection to the speaker outside of power plug. So let's just, while we're talking about this here, let's take the power plug, plug it in. This is what's so cool about this setup, is that I've got one source component and I plug it in, done. So that's my connection. So I've set my switches, I've plugged in my power, I've plugged in my audio. I can then take my speaker, turn it around, put it where it's going to go. The other option, or the other connectivity would be, or could be, if you're doing the Bluesound Node. Notice the Bluesound Node doesn't have an XLR connection like the C685 does. It only has RCA, and that's where we have our little monoprice whip. So we'd actually take, again, this is our right speaker. We'd plug it into our right RCA output. We would have our XLR cable. Again, not to confuse you, it's either the C685 or the Bluesound Node. Both work, but you wouldn't have both. And I'm simply adapting my RCA and converting it to XLR. Again, no RCA connection on my speaker, so no XLR connection on here, so we've got a problem. And so I've had to source, in fact, Monoprice is one of the very few companies that makes a direct RCA to XLR connection. And because I wanted to carry one type of XLR cable, it makes sense to me. There's no real degradation here, there's no loss. The disadvantage is we're losing the main purpose of XLR, which is to have a separate grounding source, a grounding pin that we lose. And so that's why, if you're going to spend money on the cores, you're probably best served buying the C685. We'll talk about a couple other reasons why. So that's the extent of your connection. I have a power plug. So I'm going to plug my Bluesound Node in. I'm going to have two cables. Let's connect our other speaker up here. I'm going to have two cables coming out of the back. And that's all I need to do. Now we'll get into specific setup on these devices in a separate video, and on each individual device, and setting up, digitally, setting it up on your phone. Making sure you know how to set it up so that you're getting the best audio output, best quality audio output. But from a speaker standpoint, a speaker setup, it's pretty awesome. Simple setup. I don't like how this looks. Let me show you what it looks like when it's fully set up, just so you can see. And get this all out of the way here and show you how I'd set this thing up from start to finish. Let me get my Core 7 out of the way. I'm going to set up my Bluesound Node, turn this thing around. So let's say I bought my Bluesound Node, hooked up my RCA connections, going into the back of my speaker, hooking up my power cord. Obviously you would hopefully have it on an extension cord. Take my speaker. I've got all my position switches all set up in the proper place. Take my speaker, set it up here to where they're in the same spot, so I have some linearity here. That's speaker number 1. There's speaker number 2. And I would wire tie and make everything nice and pretty. I've got to connect power to my Bluesound Node. I'm going to connect my subwoofer, which we'll be talking about in a separate video. But I've got a Y adapter here. And I'm connecting to the subwoofer output. That took a minute. Could probably do it faster if I didn't fumble around here. You're going to want to zip tie and tie everything up, and that's my system. To do the C685, the only difference is I'm not going to have these little RCA adapter whips, and that's it. The reason you want the C685 other than XLR is you want direct live. So if you have a really horrible echoey sounding garage, direct live is a room calibration software. They provide you a microphone. You take 20, 25, 30 positional measurements, and then you make some frequency adjustments. We'll have a video showing you how to do that. And so just imagine your garage. You had 2 core subs, a pair of Core 59s, a C685, you did a direct calibration, you've got yourself a freaking sick audio system in the garage. So that's the Dynaudio cores, how you set them up, pretty simple. We'll have more videos coming in the future as I set up. I'm going to be moving this garage to the Yarn building, so I'll be setting up my Core 59s. I'm doing a customer's garage here with Core 59 soon, so we'll shoot some longer format, actually showing you it physically getting installed. So that stuff will be coming, but I did want a direct, simple video showing you how you set up your speakers if you buy them. I know that when I buy something, especially something expensive, while I'm waiting for it to show up, while it's transporting across the country via UPS, I'm watching all the videos I can. So I think this video needs to exist. So thanks for watching, and thanks for your support. I cannot explain to you how much I love this system. It's freaking awesome. It's not supposed to go together, but it does, and it does famously well. Like, fan-freaking-tastic. So thanks for watching. As always, stay tuned for more crazy. If you have questions, hit us up. We're happy to help. See you soon.